My name is Katie Rockley, and I'm a librarian at the Lyon Township Public Library. I want to welcome you to our Zoom meeting tonight. I'm happy to answer any library questions you may have, so feel free to use the chat function in the Zoom. So that's located in the bottom middle of your Zoom screen. So if you chat on, or if you click on the little bubble icon, a little chat box should appear to the right of your screen, and you can type in there and ask questions to me or any of our speakers tonight. I want to thank everyone for joining us for this important discussion, and especially give a hearty thank you to Rick Bloom and Mary Schwartz from Bloom Advisors and Claudia Schwenzer, hopefully I'm pronouncing everyone's last name correctly, from the Greater Michigan chapter of the Alzheimer's Association for taking the time to spend an evening with us. And also to Susan for offering tech support, so I'm really thankful for that. But before I turn it over to them, I just want to go over a few housekeeping details. We are recording this Zoom event, so if you don't feel comfortable, keep your video off. But if you feel comfortable enough, you can turn your video on so we can see your faces. We'll be spotlighting our guest speakers, but I'm going to keep everyone muted. Please use the raise your hand function or the chat option to ask questions or request to be unmuted to ask a question directly. And secondly, we will be monitoring the chat. So you may notice we may respond in the chat or we may respond outright to your questions through the audio. If there's anything disruptive during the Zoom meeting, whether through sound or video, it may result in your dismissal. You just want to make sure everyone can enjoy the shared environment in a comfortable and safe online environment. Next, I want to invite you to participate in our upcoming virtual events. Please consider joining us Thursday, October 29th at 7 p.m. as Bill Konkoleski from MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network, presents on UFOs over Michigan. And then at the beginning of November, on the 3rd at 7 p.m., we are meeting for a monthly book discussion. Everyone is reading Kent State by author Back Durf, and we'll be discussing his graphic novel. And you may have seen us marketing him quite extensively over the past month or so. It's because he is our community reads pick for this year, and we do this annually. And Novi is hosting him as a virtual author visit on November 12th at 7 p.m. So you have to go to their website to register for that virtual author visit, but we're really excited about it. So we're co-sponsoring that event. Registration is required for all events on our website for our virtual events in the event calendar at www.ltpl.org. Lastly, we welcome your feedback, if you don't mind, in the form of a short survey, and this will be a automatically generated email that will be sent out to you tomorrow. So if you wouldn't mind taking the time to share some feedback, we really appreciate that. We take everything you say into consideration when we're planning future programs, and we look forward to hearing from you. So now, without further ado, I welcome our speakers.
Excellent. So my name is Claudia. I am a program coordinator with the Michigan chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and I'll start us off with Dementia Conversations. Rick, did you want to go ahead and introduce yourself now?
Sure. I just want to say hi and welcome. Thanks so much for having me. For anyone who's listening, these are important conversations to have. So I would encourage you to listen, take notes, and ask questions. For those of you who have been down this road before, you know how difficult it is. And the key is to plan. The more you plan, the easier it will be. So enjoy tonight. I know I will.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. Yeah, we have done Dementia Conversations with Rick Bloom. We've started this in March, and I don't have a total number of times that we've done it, but every time it's been a success. So it really, for us at the Alzheimer's Association, to be able to give the content of Dementia Conversations, but then also actual aspects of legal and financial planning is just absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going to turn my video off as well so that I am not distracted by seeing my own face. Okay, so welcome. We'll dive right into Dementia Conversations. This program really is designed to help you talk with your entire family, including the person with signs of dementia. And we're going to go over some really challenging and often uncomfortable topics related to Alzheimer's and dementia. And I do want to say here that, these discussions may not be easy to have, and they're not going to be easy for you to have, and they're not going to be easy for the person experiencing changes in functioning. We have this fear of hurting people that we love, people that we provide care for. We may have a fear of facing changes related to aging and dementia. And, just the word dementia and Alzheimer's can put people on edge. And we may also have to deal with difficult family dynamics. So there's just a lot that goes into these conversations. And you may try to wait until that time is right to have conversations about driving or legal and financial planning, but really that time rarely occurs. And I think as you'll find throughout this program, the sooner that you have these conversations, the better. So, in this way, the wishes of the person with dementia can be included as much as possible. And, this really can help you just in case any unexpected situations arise, or you can even avoid them really by planning ahead. All right, so with that, we'll go right into it. So, the changing needs of the person with dementia or, with suspected dementia, or they're showing signs, those signs often signal that it's time to talk, right? And, we've heard at the chapter, and we're a national association, so really across, our association, we've heard from people who tell us that some of the most difficult conversations they had with their parent or with somebody that they provide care for were really about these things right here. So going to the doctor to get that diagnosis or another kind of medical care, deciding when it's necessary to stop driving, and making plans for managing finances and getting those legal documents together to be sure that their wishes are carried out and the costs of future care are covered. And that's a really big anxiety for families, is thinking about just the magnitude of the cost of care that's going to be coming at them. So keep in mind that as we talk about each of these conversations, I'm going to be giving you some different approaches, and not all of these will be appropriate for each person. The approach that's going to work best for you will involve you customizing it to fit the needs and preferences of the person with symptoms and with your family. And we'll get into that when we get there, when we talk about, especially when we talk about driving, that's really going to come up. Okay, so some objectives for us. So by the end of the program, we're really hoping that what you get out of this is that we give you some tips on how to break the ice and have the most common difficult conversations. We want to help you plan ahead and build a care team that communicates well, give you the opportunity to hear from people who are dealing with similar issues, and connect you with helpful resources. And those resources will be coming from us, and you'll see Susan put some resources in the chat, and those resources will also be coming from Bloom Advisors as well. All right, so getting right into it, really, you might not right now in this moment be thinking of yourself as a caregiver, or maybe you do already, but you may be noticing some changes or signs in the person you care about that are causing you concern. And often we find ourselves avoiding these conversations or talking ourselves out of difficult conversations around these issues. Sometimes our family members say that they don't need our help. You're noticing changes and you offer to help, but they say that they don't need it. There's nothing wrong, they're fine. You don't need to help. We might assume that other family members who live closer are taking care of things, or we might fear that, if we do help, we might take away the person's sense of independence. And another aspect is, family might disagree about whether there's a problem to begin with at all. So these are just some things to consider going into the conversation that, that you might not have been aware of, but maybe this will help you understand your situation a little bit in terms of how you've been thinking about it, whether it's been consciously or unconsciously. All right, so we'll go over really briefly some tips about the conversations, and then we'll dive into driving and going to the doctor and all those things. So the first tip that we have for successful conversations, sooner is better than later. You do not want to wait for a crisis to occur before having these conversations. You can actually avoid that crisis, like I said before, by talking about the issues and taking action in advance. And by talking early in the disease process, you'll be able to hear directly from them, with the person with dementia, about what their wishes are, while they can still contribute and be part of the planning process. Because as we know with dementia and Alzheimer's, eventually that cognitive function will decline. And the second tip that we have here, develop a plan for using finesse. So we know that these are difficult conversations to have, but despite that, they need to take place to ensure their safety and well-being. And successful conversations start with being prepared in advance. And that's what we mean by finesse. So how to introduce the topic in a way that will be gentle and minimize resistance. And this involves understanding how difficult this conversation can be and thinking about how to gently position the discussion for a positive outcome. Also consider what you will do regardless of how the person responds. So here, we like to provide some examples. So let's say, when you're talking to that person, ask them whether they would want to know if you've noticed changes in functioning. Just to think about how to get the conversation started. Do they want to know if you see changes in them? And if they say yes, I would want you to tell me if you notice changes. This can help open that discussion. But if they say no, I don't want to know if you've noticed any cognitive changes in me, you can take that moment to focus on the fears that accompany these changes and how important it is to talk about these changes openly. And the actual conversation about planning and all that can come later, but here in this moment, you're going to talk about, I know it's scary to think about the changes that you're noticing in yourself. You're not remembering things like you used to. You're forgetting appointments. Maybe you put something like a book in the oven, or it was just kind of odd. I'm worried about that, and I know maybe you are too, and it is scary to think about. The third tip, take notes about the changes that you see. This is going to help you now as you have the conversation or plan to have the conversation. And it's also going to help you when you go to the doctor, and we'll get to that when we dive into that section. So here, begin observing and noting examples of behaviors that concern you. So you can write down, you put a book in the oven the other day, and luckily I opened up the oven and I saw it in there before I turned it on to make dinner. Do you think that was odd, or do you remember what happened in that moment? Just different things that you notice, you can write them down. And take notes after you see something of concern so you can accurately talk about what you've noticed. Write them down so you don't forget the important points that you want to cover, and you can bring these with you when you have the conversation. So you can point to, last week when you were driving, you did not see the red traffic light and you just went right under it. And that really concerned me. When you are taking notes to bring to the conversation, be prepared to talk about your own feelings. I know that this may be uncomfortable for some people, but consider using I statements and try to avoid any suggestion of blame or criticism. You did this thing, but instead flip it and say, it really worried me, or I was really worried when you ran under the traffic light and it was red. And be gentle in your discussion. Keep their feelings in mind. You really want to avoid them feeling ganged up on, getting them defensive. Okay, the next one that we have is practice in advance. Rehearsing, talking about sensitive topics with other family members can be helpful. It'll help you feel more comfortable when you do have the actual conversation, and it can help you brainstorm different things that they might say, because you know them the best, right? So you know what they might say. I know exactly what my dad would say, and I know how I would respond. So if you think about it from their perspective, consider possible solutions to offer during the conversation. All right, and the last one, talk when you are both relaxed and comfortable. So initiate that conversation at a time and place when the person is relaxed, when they're well rested and comfortable. You know, if you know that they're not a morning person, maybe don't try to have this conversation at 9 a.m. Maybe wait for a time when they're relaxed and you know that they're willing to have a conversation with you. All right, so with that, we're gonna go right into how to talk to somebody about going to the doctor. And this could be for a diagnosis or any other reason, really. So when somebody in your life does exhibit those changes, you know, those changes in thinking or behavior that just doesn't seem like them, it is important to be aware that they could be signs of Alzheimer's or another type of dementia. And the key here is that they could be. There are changes that are typical of aging, you know, like it's just taking longer to remember an appointment or a name, or maybe you need a reminder about how to use the remote or a new technology. But you may start to notice issues that go beyond typical aging. And these are things like getting lost in familiar places. If they are really social, maybe they're no longer that extrovert or no longer so conversational like they used to be, they're more withdrawn. Maybe they're asking the same questions repeatedly, or they're forgetting recent events, right? And people with dementia typically first recognize signs that have to do with forgetting how to do things that they used to do with ease. So maybe they always balance their checkbook to the penny, but now it's getting really difficult for them to do that, or they're paying bills multiple times, or they're withdrawing money multiple times, right? And conversations can go more smoothly if you make reference to those changes rather than, you know, those that the person has not noticed in him or herself. So you know that they know that they're not balancing their checkbook, and it's better for you to make reference to that than saying, you didn't notice that you ran under that red traffic light? How could you not know that? And sometimes the person may be reluctant, fearful, or angry when you try to get them to seek help. And this can be because, you know, their feelings about the disease. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes the words dementia or Alzheimer's really put us on edge, and they can really put the other person on edge. You know, we think about the effects of the disease itself. It may also reflect their cultural traditions. It may reflect stigma about the disease as well. But we'll go into some tips that can help you get them to the doctor. And it can feel awkward to approach someone about cognitive changes, you know, but many times they've noticed these changes in themselves already, and they might already have some concern, and they may be afraid. And denial is one of those ways that we protect ourselves from feeling overwhelmed. So denial is normal. It's not going to be like, oh, how could you not be concerned about yourself? But the changes, like I said before, might be due to something other than Alzheimer's. And acknowledging this can help the person agree to take action. So we're going to jump over into a video. We're going to listen to Donna, and she's going to talk about why it's important to have this conversation.
I think you have to be honest. I think that's the important thing with it. To get a loved one to the doctor, I think you just need to be candid and honest of what are you trying to do. We're trying to understand what we're up against. It's just so important to do that, because you can't battle something that you don't know what you're battling. Again, it may not have been Alzheimer's, it could have been depression, it could have been so many other things. And guess what? There's other things you can do to take care of those issues as well. But that's what you need to be able to do. You know, you can't ignore something. It's not going to go away.
Oh, excuse me. Donna had really great things to say. It reminds me of something that we have another community educator who talks about how she was able to get her mom to the doctor, and she had to frame it in such a way that was, you know, okay, we're all seeing cognitive changes in you, but let's go to the doctor to get a baseline. Because it's just like Donna said, you don't know what you're battling, right? But if we do have that baseline established, that baseline cognitive function, we can see, okay, is there an actual decline? Is there something else going on? So it's really important to know what it is that you're battling. And suggesting a doctor's visit can be all really that is needed to get the ball rolling. But other times, you know, just being honest and direct isn't enough, and the person needs more support or direction. And so we're going to go over some ideas here. So the first is, use words that are most comfortable for them. If you know that they are going to get defensive when you say Alzheimer's, you can say something like, let's talk with the doctor about the fact that you're having more trouble doing some things than you used to. Instead of saying something like, we need to have you see a doctor to do an assessment for Alzheimer's disease. That is a lengthy process. It's not an easy one to do, but if you say, let's just go talk with them and say that you're having more trouble doing some things that you used to do and used to do them with ease, instead of jumping right to Alzheimer's and dementia, because it could be something else. It could be a thyroid problem. I mean, it could be depression. There's a couple other things that it could be. So the next one is let the person know that it's time for the annual wellness visit. And the annual wellness visit has been offered at no charge by Medicare since 2011. And it's a visit used for, updating a personalized prevention plan that can prevent disease and disability. And it does include an examination, excuse me, I'm talking to you guys, an examination of the patient's cognitive and behavioral changes that may indicate a form of dementia, something like Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia. And some people have not heard of this benefit, but this could be, a gateway to getting them to the doctor, just saying, hey, we could get this free wellness visit done, and you don't even have to mention that they're going to do a cognitive assessment. You can just use this as a way to get them there. All right, the next one is you can pair an enjoyable outing with a doctor's visit. I know it's a little different now with COVID. It's not like you can just go to the movie theater after a doctor's visit. But what you could do is, maybe you have some ice cream at home. I mean, you could go to the doctor and say, okay, afterwards, we're going to go home. We're going to enjoy this dinner together. I know you really like it. We're going to make it together. So just get creative about what they enjoy to do for fun. Maybe they like a specific game to play or whatever the case may be, having lunch together or whatever else. So really pair something enjoyable with the doctor's visit. Get them a little excited about the day. The next one is invite family to communicate concerns and questions to the doctor. So whether you're actually able to be there for the appointment or not, and my guess is maybe not, you can prepare a list of concerns and questions, and you can provide that information to the doctor before the appointment. But because of HIPAA, the doctor won't be able to speak with you directly about that patient without a signed release, but you can provide information. So if your family member agrees to it, it can be helpful to get that signed release of information that would allow the doctor to communicate directly with you. HIPAA is all about flow of communication, right? And this release can be signed at the doctor's office as well. All right, and the last one here is if the person is still reluctant, you could try a therapeutic fib. And I know some people are really, when I say therapeutic fibs, they kind of get on the defensive because, they're like, why would I need to use that right now? We're not in middle stage of Alzheimer's disease or dementia. But it is important to know that people with Alzheimer's do experience that reduced ability to use good judgment and make good decisions. And sometimes this can contribute to their reluctance to going to the doctor. So in these situations, if they are absolutely adamantly reluctant to go to the doctor, their safety and care comes first. And you may need to use the therapeutic fib. And I'll give you some examples. So, some family members or friends will tell the person that a doctor's visit is required by the insurance company, or maybe even by the doctor, in order to authorize, like, let's say a prescription, or maybe to renew a policy or something. And invoking that outside authority can really help the visit seem less like a criticism of them and their current level of functioning, and more like, oh, but it's required by insurance, so we have to do this, really to make them feel less defensive. All right, so we are going to go right into driving. So like we've heard, like I said, from others, having a conversation about driving may be one of the first difficult conversations that you will have after a diagnosis is made. And you may notice signs that your family member's driving has changed, like there's more accidents, or there's tickets for moving violations, or you may even see things that are more subtle, like scrapes on the car or some dents in the garage maybe, or if you look at, there's side mirrors Maybe there's some scratches or some dents there, or pushed in, you know, if they move, if you have the side mirrors that are able to move. You may have even seen them make mistakes while you were in the car, which can be really scary if you're a passenger. But even though, you know, we will need to stop driving at some point. Everyone eventually will need to stop driving at some point. And people are often reluctant to consider this because they're afraid to relinquish their independence. Really, when it comes to driving, it's all about independence, right? And some denial that anything is wrong can allow a dangerous situation to continue. But if you really deal with it head on and you address it head on early, you can help ease that transition and really, I mean, help them feel safe and secure and keep other drivers secure as well. So we're going to listen to Chris, and he will tell us how this conversation happened with his family.
There's no exact answer on this is when you stop driving. You could tell when coming up to an intersection, as an example, the ability to understand what's going on around you was starting to deteriorate a little bit. Being on the highway with cars on both sides becomes a little bit more difficult. And first and foremost, the safety of everybody in the car as well as other drivers on the road. You think about that and you want to make sure you're not putting anybody in danger. But then the difficult part is telling your dad, who you love, and you know he loves driving and he's used to it, that he can no longer do that. But then even then, taking the keys away full time was very difficult. The doctor was very helpful in just saying, you know, medically, you can't do this anymore. But my mother had the hardest time with this because she knew how much this was going to hurt him as well. And this is one of the first things that we had to deal with as a family when it came to telling my dad that he had to stop doing something because of this disease. That meant a lot to him.
Yeah. All right. So Chris made, you know, really great points. And with dementia, there is no single moment when the decision to stop driving should be made. I mean, people in the early stage do drive. I mean, they're able to drive to the store. They're able to drive, you know, to a family member's house. But you can incorporate, if it is time to stop driving, you can incorporate their doctor or other professionals to let the person know that it is time to stop driving. Oh, excuse me. All right, so here are those tips for having that conversation. It is time to stop driving. So the first is plan ahead before an accident occurs. Please plan ahead before an accident occurs. Before changes in the ability to drive are seen. So we're talking early stage. Talk about the fact that the person will need to stop driving at some point. Say, you know, Dad, at some point you are going to have to stop driving. And I know that is difficult. And just go into the conversation from there. Some people may find it helpful to have an open discussion, and you can actually develop an agreement about how the person would like you to recognize that it's time to stop driving. So they'll say to you, when you start to notice that I'm making more mistakes on the road, please let me know that it's time to stop driving. Or maybe something like, if you start to see scrapes on the car, please let me know that, okay, this is the threshold where I stop driving. And when the time comes, they may not remember that this conversation ever took place. So it can be helpful to write notes down about your agreement to use later, or even ask the person to sign what we call a driving contract. And we have one, or we use one from the Hartford, which actually posts something like this for free. So I think, let me see over in the chat. I think Susan posted it. Yep, it's a free driving agreement for use with family and the person with dementia. And they can just sign it. And then in the future, when it is time to stop driving, you can refer to it and say, okay, Dad, do you remember when, well, you wouldn't want to ask them if they remembered because they don't, but you would say, Dad, you signed this and you said that this is the point where you need to stop driving. All right, the second one, express your concern about specific changes you noticed. So let them know that you care about them and you support them, and you reinforce that care, that, you know, I love you and I care about you and I want you to be safe. That is the reason for your concern. So use specific examples to here to show that these are real problems. You know, last week you did something really different on the road. Here's what happened, and you go into it and you say, that concerned me. So here we want to reinforce that you care about them and you care about their safety. And that's hopefully going to open up the conversation. I love this tip. Appeal to the person's sense of responsibility and concern for others. Oftentimes that is what some people need. You know, you say something like, I know you wouldn't want an accident to happen or for you to get hurt or someone else to get hurt. And sometimes that can be enough for people. And they say, you know what, you're right. I don't want my grandchildren to get hurt in the car or anything like that. All right. So we have another video here, and this is Sheila, and she is going to talk about the issue of driving as it happened with her father.
Some tips on having the conversation is pointing out, especially for my father, the potential danger to others that it may cause if he's behind the wheel. And, you know, just talking about it from the standpoint that this is not only the best thing for you, but this is also the best thing for others around you. And these are some of the alternatives, making sure that, you know, this is what's going to happen, having a plan. You know, if mom can't take you, then Uncle Thomas or some, you know, will be here to take you, and we will make sure that you're getting out of the house and that you're doing some things. So, you know, presenting the bad news, but then also presenting the plan. And for my father, that's really, really important to have a plan.
All right. So like I said, and like Sheila said, you know, the safety of the person who is experiencing changes and the safety of others on the road is a key issue, right? It's not something that we can ignore. And it does help to have a plan in place that lets the person know that you've made arrangements to help them continue to live their life and to make them feel like they can still go out and do things and be involved with others. So here it is again, offer alternate plans for transportation. And when you make plans for transportation, you know, be sure to include transportation to places that will help them maintain social connections and hobbies. So thinking about, oh, how are you going to get to the doctor and to the store, but also how are you going to see your friends and how are you going to see your family? And when you talk with them, provide reassurance that you want them to maintain their active lifestyle and you want them to maintain as much independence as you want them to have, right? All right, and the last one, incorporate the voice of a professional and have empathy. Easier said than done, right? So with this tip, you know, you can ask a physician to write a letter or even have them take a little piece of paper for maybe a prescription, right? And write on there, stop driving, or you can no longer drive. Sometimes, you know, having that authority voice or having that outside perspective from somebody that they respect and as a professional can really be the driving force for them to stop driving. When you do have your conversation, when I encourage you to have empathy, what I mean is, you know, think about ways to foresee and minimize their sense of loss. You know, consider talking to them from the standpoint of retiring from driving rather than seeing it as something that they're giving up. So sometimes even just that change in your language and the words you use can make a difference. All right, so we have another video here. So this is Wendy, and she's going to talk about what made her conversation a successful one.
Talking to somebody about stopping driving, I think it's most important to understand that that is tied to someone's independence more than most things. And so by saying you can't do this anymore is like telling the person, it's like ripping away their independence. And that doesn't feel good for anybody. I know that I've always tried to put myself in that situation. What would I think if someone was saying this to me? You don't get to do this anymore. And how would I feel? And how would I want somebody to talk to me about this? And so if you try to I think sometimes too many people try to approach it as, you know, very punitive. And I'm doing what's right for you. So why don't you understand, without really turning the tables and putting themselves in that position, understanding, you know, how helpless that feels to take those things away. It's important to be thoughtful about what that experience is like for the individual.
This video always makes me think of my dad and his mom. And my grandma is 84 or 85 and she still drives. And it's so tied to her sense of independence just based on her life experience and her history. My dad always tells her, I do not want to be there when they take the keys away from you, because it is, for her, it is that, this is my moment of freedom. But because, I know her, I know, or have an idea at least of what's going to work in that conversation. So I absolutely know that if I have a doctor write a note that says you cannot drive anymore, she's going to listen to it. She always talks about how she respects her doctors. And the other one is she will really listen to the concern and safety for others on the road. She's very empathetic. It's all about knowing the person and knowing what's going to work, right? All right. So, one of the ways that we all provide ourselves with choices that maintain our independence is by making legal and financial plans for our futures. So a lot of families do this, but then dementia enters the picture and everyone is taken by surprise, right? So we're going to listen to Chris again. And he is going to talk to us about dealing with the financial costs of Alzheimer's and dementia.
Financially, this disease will increase the cost of living. It's just a fact. So planning for those extra costs is that much more important than what you were planning for before. And so you have to review everything that's in place, see what changes need to be made, both legally and financially, and you have to monitor that going forward afterwards too.
Okay. So like Chris said, in the future, cost of living is going to go up. And that is because of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias and the care that is associated with that. Changes in plans will need to be made, right? And they will need to be monitored. And it's always good to review existing documents to make sure that they're current. But once there is that Alzheimer's or dementia diagnosis, plans that were put in place years before may need to change. So they will need to be reviewed. And I would also like to say that care partners need to update your forms as well. The person with dementia may have been named as a power of attorney prior to the diagnosis. So do you need to change that? What on your end needs to change? So some people may have plans in place, but may still be uncomfortable discussing their financial status with you. I think about asking my parents about their financial health, and it makes me cringe, right? Because for us, it is so taboo to think about, right? It's not something that we talk about with our families. You may, like I said, you may feel reluctant to do anything that may come across as intrusive, but I really encourage you at this point, please talk about it. Making legal and financial plans early will ensure that their preferences are included in the plans and that the family won't need to make rash decisions. You won't need to, go to court over anything. These are all things that we want to avoid, right? And by having this conversation now, you could hopefully avoid that. Okay, so we have another video, and this is Julie, and she's going to talk about how she had this conversation with her mom about making these legal and financial plans.
Here's what I've come to after all of this. That it's the most loving and kind thing you can do for them is to be honest with them and say, this is like a really scary thing. And I feel a lot of discomfort bringing this up to you, but I tell them, if you're going to be the one who's going to take them on this journey, then you have to tell them, I'm going to be here on this journey with you. And there are things that we have to do to get this in place. We're going to go on this journey together. I've told you I'm going to be here with you till the end. So let's get this ready. It's like we're going to go on an ocean ship. We've got to get things packed up. We've got to figure out what we're taking with us. We got to get ready. And the things that we have to get ready, we have to make sure that we know which doctors you're going to be using. I need to get this signed, okay? So that if you go in there and they have to do surgery, for example, I got to have this durable power of attorney for health care for you. I have to have this worked out, okay? Now, if for some reason, okay, you need to go to rehab after something, I have to have these documents here, the financial stuff, so I can get these things taken care of for you while this is going on. I don't want to have anything get in the way of us being able to progress and keep doing this. I said, It seems hard because it's hard in our heads. You know, everybody's heard, read about people who've stolen from elderly people, who've done these horrible things. But if you're the person who's approaching this with loving kindness and compassion, and you're willing to take this person on this journey, you're not doing a bad thing. You're doing the right thing by talking to them about it. And you approach it from the standpoint of, I'm here for you. I'm doing this for you. We're going to do this together, and I'm going to help you through this. And these are the tools that I need to make sure that we can do this.
Yeah. So like Julie said, it's talking with, you know, if it's your parents or, you know, somebody else that you provide care for, talking with them about these things that are so sensitive is the kind thing to do, and it's the right thing to do. Don't let your fears about this conversation cloud, you know, how important this is. I mean, this has to happen. And approaching it from the standpoint of being with them throughout the course of the disease and needing these documents in place will help you in the conversation as well, but it'll also help them get the best care possible. Let's go into the next slide. So I'm going to talk about, you know, and give you some tips about this conversation about legal and financial planning. And then Rick afterwards is going to come on and actually go through what's involved in legal and financial planning and some different things to consider. So when you are looking at this conversation, the first tip, begin by explaining that you're in this together. You know, and these discussions, like I said, may seem to go against some of our social norms and represent that shift in family roles. But understand that having this conversation will help you and the person with dementia make the plans that they'll need to get the best care. It will allow you to connect and enjoy your time together in the future and in the present, right? And it can be really reassuring to let them know that you will be a part of this process. Like Julie was saying, you'll be a part of this process now and in the future. And this way, the person you love can feel that you're on the same team. And the next tip, start by asking questions and gathering documents. So think of the conversation as a chance to ask questions, rather than tell the person something. Like we have to do this. Look at it from the standpoint of, okay, what documents are in place now and where are they kept? Who has copies of these documents and who should have copies? Who should review them? Is it family or any professionals involved in this review? And pull the documents together and get the ones that need to be completed in one pile or altered in another pile. All right. And explain that these are standard plans that need to be made as we get older, right? We all have to do this. So you may be able to reduce resistance to the process by explaining that, you know, these discussions and completing these documents are things that we all need to do as we age. So you're not doing anything out of the norm or anything special here. We all have to do this as we get older. The next one, break the conversation into parts and try different times and locations, because this is a lengthy conversation. This is, there's a lot that goes into this, right? So I don't think anybody expects you to be able to do this in one sitting. You know, you can break it into parts. You can do little aspects of financial planning here, and then, you know, reconvene and finish it up, and then move on in another section to legal and financial planning, and, you know, split it up. You know, if you've tried to have this conversation in person, you may be able to try it in person. You could write a letter if you wanted to get the conversation started. And don't feel like you have to cover everything in one sitting. I mean, really, don't add more weight on your shoulders than is already there. All right, and the last one, involve others to help talk about finances. And ask a financial advisor to help with the conversation, or maybe involve, you know, a sibling. And some families make decisions to pool resources to ensure that care can be provided and the expenses can be paid. And it is important, as Rick is going to discuss, it is important to understand the financial situation so that your family can make the best long-term care choices. All right, so with that, I am going to pass it over to Rick. We're just going to do a quick little switch over here. Let me pull up Rick's slides.
Well, thank you, Claudia. And as you do that, I just want to reiterate how important these conversations are. And I would always tell people that these are adult conversations and that you're doing them because you love that person. And you know, when you take a step back and you think about that, it's a taboo to talk about legal and financial issues in our country. You kind of think, and you take a step back and you say to yourself, we live in the greatest capitalist society in the history of the world. We should never be afraid to talk about money. And as far as I'm concerned, I agree with that. These are adult conversations and they need to be had. So what I want to talk about, first of all, is some of the estate planning issues that you have to consider. And when I talk about estate planning, always keep this in mind. This is really for everyone. I think that from the time you're an adult, you need to do some estate planning. And the reason for that is we live in a world that anything and everything can happen. If I would have told you, back in February that we're going to have this virus, you'd sit there saying, I'm nuts. Well, look what's happened. So estate planning really is for everyone. And if you're helping a loved one that is getting older with dementia, you should also ask yourself, maybe I should be doing my estate plan at the same time, because it's just as important for everyone. So what I always like to start with when it comes to estate planning, and Claudia mentioned it about gathering documents, one of the things I see always that happens either upon death or a family emergency is people can't locate things. They do not know where the legal documents are kept. They don't know passwords, and it becomes very stressful. So what I recommend everyone do is have what's called a document locator. What do I have and where are things located? So example, you have a life insurance policy. Well, someone should know what company you have the life insurance policy with, and who the beneficiaries are and who the agent is so that they can contact. So everyone has all sorts of different types of financial and legal documents. They need to organize it and have a locator in one central location that if something happens, someone knows where to go, and now all of a sudden they have their roadmap. So they know what you have. And on that document locator, you don't necessarily have to list every investment you have, but you have to list where the investments are. For example, you may have an account through Fidelity. Well, someone should know what account number, what's your account number at Fidelity. They don't have to know every individual investment within Fidelity, but they have to know you have an account number. State of Michigan has millions and millions and millions of dollars of money that's not theirs. It was money that was lost because people either passed away, they never claimed it. It happens all the time. And I would tell you, the last people we want to ever give our money to is the government. We want it going to our family. Well, to prevent it going to others, make sure you do this document locator. You can handwrite it out, you can put it on your computer, do all sorts of things, but it should be a roadmap. You need to include on the legal end, if you have any estate planning documents, where they are, the attorney that drafted them. In financial things, you should have where all your financial assets are and whose name they're titled in. Do you have a trust? All your life insurance policies, if you have any. I see this all the time. People have these group life insurance policies. They may have gotten through an organization and they totally forget about them. Well, they add up and it's your money. You don't want to lose it. And what also you should put on this document locator, which is becoming more and more important, is if you have an online presence, what is your login information? Because that may be the only way someone can find out what you have. When you do a document locator, you can't just do it once and forget about it. Because just like our passwords change, we have to change those on a regular basis. You have to change your document locator. So every time you change a password, you have to update your document locator. And you don't necessarily have to show someone where it is. You have to tell someone you have it, the person you trust the most, and if something happens to you, that's where they should go to get your roadmap. I can't tell you how many billions of dollars Americans have lost because of US savings bonds because they never cashed them out. You don't want that to be you. You want all your resources being able to be used for your benefit. Therefore, take your time in doing this document locator and make sure you have everything in there. From a legal standpoint, we talk about estate planning. There are two documents that you need that are effective while you are living, but terminate upon death. Because estate planning is more, whenever you talk estate planning, people think it's always planning for your death. It's more than that. It's also planning for a family emergency. We live in a world, and as they talked about earlier, we have all these privacy rights and they have to be waived. Well, who waives them if you can't do it? That's what powers of attorney do. So the first one is a medical durable power of attorney. And you want to couple that with the HIPAA release. And usually in most good medical durable power of attorneys, they have a HIPAA release. And what a medical durable power of attorney does in English is to give someone the right to sit in your shoes and make the decisions you would have based upon the facts. So that person who has your medical durable power of attorney can get medical records. They can get second opinions. They can also authorize life support or not authorize life support. And the person you give this power to should be the person that you trust the most that will make the decisions you would have based upon the facts of the time. A lot of people have what are called living wills. And that used to be a thing 20, 30 years ago. They're not anymore. You need to update those into medical durable powers of attorney. And if you haven't done one probably in the last 5 years, there's been law changes, you need to redo it. The nice thing about medical durable power of attorney, you don't necessarily have to pay anyone to do it. There are a lot of free forms available through the state of Michigan. We also have some on our website at bloomadvisors.com, so you can get free medical durable power of attorneys. And as far as I'm concerned, every adult in Michigan needs one. And I mean every adult. So when a child turns 18, they should have a medical durable power of attorney. It used to be that husbands can make decisions for wives and wives can make decisions for husbands. That's no longer the case. And so I believe if you want to keep family affairs away from judges, courts, and lawyers, medical durable power of attorneys are essential to accomplishing that. Particularly in this world today, we have so many blended families. It's important that everyone have a medical durable power of attorney. The next power of attorney is what's called a general durable power of attorney. Now, a general durable power of attorney covers things above and beyond medical. So it may be dealing with your landlord, dealing with a store, dealing with the IRS. And so I always recommend that along with the medical, you give someone a general durable power of attorney. And that power of attorney would allow someone to step into your shoes and make the decisions you would have, everything above and beyond medical, so you don't have to go to court. You could have the same person have the medical power and the general durable power. You could have multiple persons be involved. That's totally up to you. But when you have a general durable and a medical durable power of attorney, you basically are giving someone all the power they need so they never have to go to court. We all hear the horror stories of when someone goes through probate, and usually they talk about some rich person and all the problems. Well, probate is for everyone, and there's all sorts of problems. It's a time-consuming and it's expensive procedure. my general view is you want to keep family affairs within the family. And the best way to do that is the medical durable power of attorneys and general durable power of attorneys. Now, those power of attorneys both terminate upon death. So upon death, they're not valid. One of the things that when we deal with death is we want to make sure that your money goes to whom you want in the fastest, least expensive way possible. And one way of doing that is your beneficiaries. If you have not reviewed who you've named as beneficiaries recently, you should do that because family situations change. I cannot tell you how many times I've dealt with someone that passes away and they've named an ex-spouse as beneficiary of their life insurance policy. And so it's important that where you can have beneficiary designations, you do so. The benefit of having a beneficiary designation is that upon death, that property doesn't have to go through probate. It goes directly to whoever the beneficiary is. In the old days, you could only really have it on life insurance policies. Not so true today. Today, you can have beneficiaries on your IRAs. If you have a brokerage account at Vanguard, Fidelity, or Schwab, you can also have a beneficiary. So I think it's important that you go through your beneficiary designations to make sure they're still who you want, and you should name a secondary one. And on items that you don't have beneficiaries, you should consider putting them down. They're important and they help with the estate plan. Because remember this upon death. We want to make things as easy as possible. When you have beneficiary designations, the money goes directly to that person. It's the fastest, easiest way. There's also two other documents that we deal with when it comes to estate planning, and those are wills and trusts. Wills are for everyone. Everyone needs a will, period. Now, what a will says is when I die, who's going to be in charge of my estate and who gets any money left over in my estate. And also, more importantly, and this is for those that are younger that have minor children, who is going to be in charge of your children? Who's going to be their guardian if you are not around? That's really what wills do. Now, in today's world, you will find that a lot of people don't have they have a will, but upon their death, they never have to go to court to have the will entered because all their assets have passed above and beyond the court's jurisdiction. In other words, if you had a beneficiary on your Fidelity policy, your Fidelity account, upon your death, you had a beneficiary that goes directly to that person. There's nothing there to probate. But you need a will as a catch-all. And for those of you that may not have a lot of assets, there's a free fill-in-the-blank will you could use. It's called the Michigan Statutory Will. It's available in the libraries. It's available online through the state. It's a very good, simple will just to leave your assets to someone. Wills are also go hand in hand with trusts. And trusts are a totally different vehicle. Wills take effect upon your death. Trusts generally take effect once you execute the trust. So what a trust is, and a lot of people think you have to have lots of money to have trust. This is for the millionaires. No, it's not. Trusts are for everyone. Not everyone needs one, but everyone should consider one. What a trust is a mechanism to hold property. So I have a living trust, and all my mutual funds that I own are all in the name of my trust. It holds those assets. Upon my death, the trust doesn't die, I die, the trust doesn't, And so someone else steps in and then follows the terms of the trust, distributes the money to who I choose without having to go to court. So if you have assets that you can't have a beneficiary on, trusts are the most effective way of having those assets titled in the name of the trust. Therefore, you don't have to go through probate. Now, there are all sorts of trusts, but we're talking about the basic trust today. And in that trust, there are 3 jobs that really are important. The first one is what we call the settlor. The settlor is the person who is establishing the trust. The settlor, that is the only person who can make changes to the trust. 2, you have the beneficiary of the trust. The beneficiary is the person who benefits from the trust. The settlor never changes. Beneficiaries can change. And 3, you have the trustee. The trustee is the person or persons who manages the trust, who's in charge of the trust assets. So let's take my trust, the Rick Bloom Trust. I am the settlor because I'm the one who set up the trust, so I'm the only one who can make changes to it. 2, during my lifetime, I am the only beneficiary of the trust, which means as long as I'm living, the trust has to operate for my benefit. 3, as long as I'm capable, I am the trustee of the trust. I run the trust. So during my lifetime, as long as I can handle my affairs, I am the only one who could change the trust. I am the only one who could benefit from the trust, and I'm the one who runs the trust. I'm not giving up any control over my assets. However, the benefits come in is when I can't maintain control. In that case, someone steps in and is the successor trustee. In my situation, it's my brother. And so he then doesn't have to go to court. I resign. He steps in and he runs the trust. I'm still the beneficiary during my lifetime, so the trust has to be run for my benefit. And because I'm the settlor, I'm the only one who could change it. Upon my death, the successor trustee, my brother, is still in charge. And then there's a new beneficiary. And then he distributes the money to that person. That's how trusts work. And that's why a lot of people use living trusts, because they avoid probate. So you don't have judicial supervision, you don't have ridiculous costs, and your affairs remain private. I cannot tell you how important it is for everyone to consider all these documents. And I always tell people all the time, there's only one real reason you do estate planning. And when I'm in a group of people, I always ask them to raise their hands, what do they think the reason is? And the majority of people say, well, to avoid probate, and you could use it to avoid taxes, estate taxes, which is true. However, I always tell people, by the time the trust really takes effect, you're 6 feet under. So you don't really care about taxes. What you care about, and the reason you do estate planning, is because you love your family. That's the reason. And I would tell you, when you deal with someone that has dementia or Alzheimer's, that is one of the keys to the conversation, is you're doing this out of love. It has nothing to do other than love of family. Now, unfortunately, you can't do these documents once and forget about it. These require, just like a garden, constant care. So at least every couple of years, you should pull out your estate plan, review it to make sure that it's still current, because family situations change, your situation change, and you may find that you have to make decisions. I can assure you, if you haven't relooked at your trust in 5 or 10 years, it's out of date and you need to make changes. So those are the legal considerations, and these are even more important as someone becomes, infected with dementia or Alzheimer's. And the reason is because it gets to be a point in time where someone may not have the legal capacity to make changes in their documents or to execute these documents. And in those situations, the one alternative you have is you go to court and you have your self-appointed guardian, and then you constantly have to go to court and report to the judge. So my view is it's never good to have judges, courts, and lawyers involved in family affairs. If you do these documents and keep them current, you're showing an extreme amount of love for your family. You're making it easier to handle a family crisis. I want to move in now and talk about some of the financial considerations. And again, I want to reiterate, these conversations are important and you have to have them. And I know sometimes it is uncomfortable to talk about finances, but it shouldn't be. Everyone deals with different financial issues. No one should be embarrassed about their financial situation. It is what it is, but you need these conversations. So when I think from a good financial standpoint, and again, I think this applies pretty much to everyone, I think you should start off by doing a balance sheet. A balance sheet, nothing more than a listing of all your assets and all your liabilities. You have to know where you're starting from. And when you list liabilities, not all liabilities are the same. You may have charge card liabilities where you're paying 18.5% interest. You may have a mortgage where you're paying 3%. So it's important to know what that interest rate is on those, on the debt instruments. And when you go through your personal family balance sheet, one of the things I always get people that ask me, well, Rick, how do I value my baseball card collection? And everyone thinks their baseball card collection is worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Everyone has collectibles. Other people like to call it junk, but have collectibles they think of as value. Just because something's valuable to me doesn't make it valuable to others. So before you list collectibles on your personal balance sheet, go to a site like eBay and find out what similar things are selling for. You may be surprised. I remember someone had like 30 years of Sports Illustrated, and he thought they were worth so much money until he went on eBay and found that there are people selling those for $50. So be cautious about what you do on your balance sheet. I like putting assets that really have a value, your house, your investments. Those things are easier to value. When you value your house, remember, it's not what you think it's worth, it's what houses in your area are selling for. The second thing I think everyone needs to do, and particularly if you're going to help someone with their finances, you have to know what it costs them to live a month. As one of the videos said, when someone comes down with Alzheimer's or dementia, that their expenses are going to go up. I can assure you that is true. But you have to know what their current expenses are. And you should do the same thing for yourselves. You should know what it costs you to live a month. I ask people that all the time when I meet with them. What does it cost you to live a month? And they'll say, I remember I had someone, he said it was $5,000 a month. So I said to him, this person happened to be a doctor, and I said, well, your take home is like $12,000 a month. So you must be saving like $7,000 a month. And he looked at me like I was nuts. He says, I'm not saving anything. I said, well, I can assure you it's not costing you $5,000 a month to live. So I think the old-fashioned way, take paper to pencil, put it down, but you really want to know what someone's cost of living is. It'll help you make better decisions for them and for yourself. You know, it's one of the amazing things to me that people buy insurance policies, but then when they need the insurance, they never put in a claim. And I always, couldn't understand it. And then I finally figured it out. The reason is because most people forgot they had those insurance policies. Well, you should pull out your insurance policies and you should see which ones make sense or which ones don't make sense. And where that's important for particularly someone that is taking over someone's finances. Someone may have a large sum of money as a cash surrender value in an insurance policy. Well, that may be a very good option to withdraw that money to use it to cover the person's expenses. But you don't know those things unless you know what the different options you have. So I think it's important to pull out those policies that you have, make a decision of whether you should keep them or not, and what to do with the cash values. Now, let me tell you this about life insurance. People always say life insurance is a good investment because it always pays off. Life insurance is not an investment. Insurance is not an investment. Insurance is a means to handle risk. That's what insurance does. I use me as an example. I play golf in the Vegas sense of the word. I like to describe my game as I get more strokes per dollar than most people. And every time I play golf, I know I'm going to lose golf balls. I don't have golf ball insurance. I can afford the dollar a ball. You insure what you cannot afford to lose. So some people have life insurance. They may not need life insurance anymore. And so you say, well, they paid for it for all those years. Great, it brought them protection for all those years. That doesn't mean you still need to pay it for years into the future. But I think it's important that you go through and you look at your insurance policies that you have. And particularly when you're taking over someone's finances, you may find that through an ex-employer or who they retired from, there may be different insurance options that may benefit you or not. I remember someone that I dealt with a few years ago, they passed, and it turned out they had one of those Aflac policies that would have covered a substantial amount of his expenses, but he never put a claim in. Make sure you know what the insurance policies are and what options you have. The government programs. Well, it's important to know that there are government programs, both state and federal, that you may qualify for. But the government's not going to come knocking at your door. You have to work hard to find these programs, whether it's through the counties, the state, the federal government. Particularly when you take over someone's finances, you should see what programs they qualify for. Particularly for those who have served our country and are veterans, the Veterans Administration has all sorts of programs that you may be able to take advantage of. So don't forget about these government programs, take advantage of them, and see which ones you qualify for. I think when you take over someone's finances, particularly in the case of Alzheimer's, it is so important that the family reach an understanding as to who's going to be in charge. When you have too many cooks, you run into problems. And so I think it's important that this is a family affair and the families agree as to who's going to be in charge of finances. And I also think one thing that you should look at, particularly when you go through the cost of living and you see what someone's financial situation is, you may realize that there is not going to be enough money to handle everything within for that person. And therefore, the family may have to put money in on their own. And there should be an agreement ahead of time as to how much people are going to put in. And the reason why you have to have that conversation ahead of time, because when you're in a crisis, that is the worst time to hold these type of conversations. You want to have these conversations when you have time to think about it. In a crisis, you don't. And let's face facts, in a crisis, everyone's emotions is on edge. And that's not the time to have these conversations. So I recommend that when you go through this, you look at someone's financial situation, you have one person in charge, but you have a game plan, and that if the money runs out, how is it going to be refunded? The last thing I want to mention, and it was briefly mentioned before, it's been a growing problem in our country, and that is elder abuse. And what mostly gets reported is the physical abuse to elderly. Well, there's also financial abuse, and you see it across the board. And the great majority of financial abuse comes from family members. I bring that up because when you deal with seniors, and if you're a senior yourself, you have to recognize you're more at risk for some sort of abuse. One, seniors should never be afraid to talk to someone if they feel they're being financially abused. It's unacceptable, and I realize it is difficult, particularly if it's a child, but you still have to notify someone else. And that's where, with families, I always think that even if one person's in charge, there should be some sort of checks and balance, so that everyone, there may be one person who's making those decisions, but everyone can see what's happening in the money. There's total transparency, because that'll protect the person and it'll protect from elder abuse. And again, elder abuse is one of the fastest growing crimes we have in America, and it comes in all sorts of forms. And in our area, it also has come into calls from the IRS. These bogus calls, it shows up on your caller ID as IRS. They are calling mostly a lot to seniors. They are threatening seniors that they're going to go to jail unless they pay up immediately. And they tell these people that they can't even use charge cards. They have to use gift cards. If you get a call from the IRS, my advice, hang up. Don't even take the call. You don't need to, because it is a scam. And the other scams that you're seeing is through the emails, where you're getting all sorts, whether it's from the IRS, Social Security. Be very cautious. And if you're not 1,000% sure that it's legit, don't answer the email. And what I always tell people is, if you think the IRS is kind of trying to contact you, check your mail, because that's how they're going to do it. And the same thing with Social Security. So elder abuse is an issue that we all need to be aware of. And if you have a senior that you're starting to handle their affairs, make sure there's a checks and balance system so that everyone is protected. So on that note, I'm going to turn it back to Claudia. I want to encourage you to type any questions that you have, and we'll make sure that we get to all the questions. And I also want to remind people that if you haven't seen on the chat feature, there's a lot of great resources that you want to check on the chat feature to take advantage of. So Claudia?
All right, thank you so much. That was excellent. I am just going to skip ahead over to and show you this really quick. So Susan put in resources from Bloom Advisors. She put in, the free documents that they have available on there, and she put other resources in there as well. So please go ahead and go through that chat. If you need to, what you could do is click on the little ellipses right next to where you send the message to somebody, and you can click on Save Chat, and that will save the chat, and it'll save all of those links so that you can go back to it and click on those for future reference. So
I want to
these are-
say thank you on that, Claudia. I never knew how to do that. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I know. It's so small, like you would never even see it. Okay, so these are the resources that we provide, and I'm just going to go over some really key ones here, and then we'll jump over into Q&A. So the first one is our alz.org website, and you can go through the links that Susan put in there, and we really have a whole wealth of information on that website. I mean, it really goes in depth. So if you have, 15 minutes or even just 10 minutes, you can go through there and find the content that you're looking for. What I do want to touch on is Alzheimer's Navigator. What did I say? Alzheimer's Navigator, excuse me. And it's alzheimersnavigator.org. And what this will do is if you do provide care for somebody with dementia, you go on this website and let's say you're worried about medication management or you want ideas on how to prevent wandering. You can go on Alzheimer's Navigator and click on your specific issue. So you can go on there and click medications, and it'll ask you a couple of, actually it's more than a couple, it'll ask you questions like a survey, and then it'll give you a safety checklist of different things to consider for wandering, for legal and financial planning is one as well, going to the doctor is another one. There's all of these different issues that you can get a checklist for to make sure that you have all of your bases covered, especially when it comes to wandering, because that is very scary for families. The next one is Community Resource Finder, and it's communityresourcefinder.org. You go on there and you type in your zip code, and we have a partnership with AARP, and it'll give you local resources that you're looking for. So let's say you're looking for in-home care. You go on this website, you type in your zip code, and it'll give you some local resources for in-home care. We have, estate planning on there as well. You can also find our support groups and our education programs. It's really great to be able to see what's local to you, like meals, transportation, different things like that. And all's connected. If you are a caregiver and let's say you're stuck on a particular issue, you're really trying to brainstorm, how do I prevent wandering? What are different ways to do that? You can go on All's Connected, and it's a forum for caregivers. So, caregivers talk about their struggles. They talk about what they're going through, their different ideas. It's really great to be able to connect to other caregivers because it truly takes a village. When you are caring for somebody with dementia, it takes a village. So to be able to have that knowledge is great. And to get it from other caregivers can be really empowering. The 24/7 helpline. So the number is 800-272-3900. This number is open 24/7. We staff it, the Alzheimer's Association. You call the number and let's say, I keep using wandering, so I'm going to use a different example. Let's say that you want to have a conversation about how to get somebody to stop driving. And you call this number, you call it any time of the day, and you talk to a clinician on the other end of the line and you say, my dad just really won't stop driving. No matter how many times or how I approach it, he will not give up the keys. And it's getting to the point that I'm really concerned about him. You can talk to the clinician on the other end of the line and they can help you brainstorm different ideas. People use this helpline for a whole host of different reasons. And if you call them and you're looking for a specific local resource, what they do is they tell us, locally, so they can tell the Michigan chapter, hey, can you follow up with Rick Bloom about so-and-so, and then we can call Rick Bloom and get him the answers to the questions that he has. You can also email Michigan chapter directly, so you can directly email our Michigan helpline, and Susan can put that in there as well. It's helplinegmc@alz.org, and she'll put that in there too. Thanks, Susan. And then lastly, I want to talk about our support groups and our education programs. We are still continuing all of those things, but they are all virtual. We're doing this to protect the health and safety of, people who are vulnerable, right? I mean, older adults are vulnerable to coronavirus and especially people with dementia, right? So we're keeping everything virtual to keep everyone safe. We do have all of our, not all, some of them are on hold, but we do have a wide range of support groups throughout Michigan. We have some that are statewide. right now because we're able to do that, which is really cool. So if you call into a statewide support group, you could be talking to somebody up in the UP. You could be talking to somebody on the West Side. It's really excellent. Or, you know, we do have some that are area specific. So we have some that are specific to the West Side. We have some that are specific to Central Michigan. I mean, there's a whole bunch. And our education programs are virtual as well. So, you know, we host them through Zoom, or, you know, we partner with agencies and organizations like this one to be able to deliver the content. So we're still out there and providing hopefully support that you need. And with that, after all of that.
And I just want to add one thing to remind everyone. I started a podcast, Rick Bloom Talks Money. Get it wherever you get your podcasts from.
Yes. Thank you, Rick. Excellent.
And I saw a question from Aaron on the chat. And Aaron, when you do a general durable power of attorney, what it does, it allows you to step in that person's shoes, write checks, sign their name, or you could sign their name, your name as power of attorney for. So yes, you'll be able to, pay bills and do everything of that nature. And that's why it's so important, because if not, you'd have to go to court. And again, I'm a lawyer, and I can tell you, the more you keep judges, courts, and lawyers out of family affairs, the easier life will be for you.
So if you have other questions, you can, I think, unmute yourself, and or you can type them into chat as well. And it can be, I always like to say, there is no stupid question. There's no question that is too small to not be answered. I mean, any question that you have, whether it's about legal and financial planning, if it's about dementia, I mean, this is important information, so any question.
Claudia, I always tell people there's no such thing as a dumb question. Dumb answers occasionally, but no dumb questions. And look at, I could tell you, I've been on this journey personally, and it's a difficult journey. And what makes it easier is to take advantage of the resources that are available to you, because you don't have to recreate the wheel. And people have been through this. When I watch those videos about the driving, and it hits home, because I had to have those conversations with, my parents, and they're tough conversations, but they're important. And as someone said, you don't want to have that conversation after there's been an accident.
Rick, we have another question. This is Susan. Someone is asking about what causes the medical durable power of attorney to come into play. So if a doctor diagnoses someone with dementia, does that cause that medical durable POA to go into effect?
Right. Typically, what most medical durable power of attorney say is if I'm unable to make that decision for me. So that's exactly right, is a doctor's going to say that this person, can't do it. Now that's mostly for life support. If it's for other things, such as getting medical records and things of that nature, generally you don't need a doctor's approval on those things. You can have that power of attorney take effect immediately. But when it's a life thing, then certainly the doctors get involved. And again, I want to reiterate, you're 18, you need a medical durable power of attorney. And I'll tell you why. I had a situation a number of years ago. Client's child was in an accident, and they were in a different state at college. And it was a few days before they got a hold of the parents. And when they went up there, doctors wouldn't even talk to them because they didn't have a power of attorney. And so had to go through the process of, going to court, and which wasn't pleasant. So you have a child, 18, they're an adult. They may not act like an adult, but they're an adult. You need a medical durable power of attorney.
All right, I see one.
We have
in
another
here.
question in the chat. Yeah.
Go ahead, Susan.
Jill is asking, so she says, we have a durable power of attorney and an advance directive concerning living will and healthcare surrogate from a will generated in 2011. We had a trust done this year. Does this make the durable power of attorney and advance directive null and void from two different lawyers?
No, those are totally different documents. So your medical directive can still be valid. So each one of those documents are independent of each other. And one of the things that you want to always want, concerned about is you want to make sure they're not contradictory. Because if they're contradictory, that's where you can run into problems. You want to coordinate all those documents together.
Excellent. And it looks like Jill is asking how.
How?
I'm assuming how to coordinate all
Well,
of the
what I would look at doing is to look at who's named in the powers of attorney, and to make sure that in the trust that the powers do not differ during lifetime from the trust, from the medical durable or the general durable power of attorney. If it's the same person that you've named as successor trustee, as the same person as the powers of attorney, then you're fine. Then you don't have to worry. If you have different people, you just need to look at the power sections and to make sure there's nothing that conflicts with each other, what powers someone has. Typically they won't, but sometimes in a trust, people give the trustee certain powers. But most of the time, you're going to be fine. But it's if you have different people, that could be an issue.
All right, thanks, Rick. One more follow-up to that. She asks, would it matter if it was generated when my mother lived in Florida, but now lives in Michigan?
It very well could, particularly the general durable power of attorney and the medical durable power of attorney. Those are really state specific. So I would tell you if she did it when she's in Florida, she should redo it in Michigan. The trust, you may not have to make any changes, but in the medical and the durable, you probably need to make a change. Just because Michigan law is just a little different than Florida law. And again, you can get a free medical durable power of attorney. Many sites, the state has them. Again, we have them on our website too. So you don't have to pay an attorney just to do a medical durable power of attorney.
Yeah, that's excellent. And Susan put that resource in there as well.
Rick, do you have any tips or suggestions for crafting your document locator or helping your loved one craft a document locator? Is there a good format or software out there that does that for you?
There is a lot of different software out there. I couldn't recommend one. It's all over my head. I do it the old-fashioned way. I write it down. You know, that's just, it makes me feel comfortable. I like to see it. But there's really, you know, people, it's like keeping their passwords. They keep them different ways. The key is that you keep it up to date and that you communicate with someone. If something happens to me, this is where my roadmap is. This is where you go. And it should be easy for that person to get what they need, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to make it easy on someone. They don't have to start searching all over the place for documents and forms and passwords and driving themselves crazy.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. All right, any other questions? Again, feel free to unmute yourself if you're able to.
Do you have any tips for family members who have become caregivers and they're dealing with burnout?
Sure, is this one's for me, I take it?
No.
What's
Oh,
yeah.
dealing with burnout.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, both of you.
I will just say that, you know, and you have to watch out for yourself too. And these are emotional draining things. And that's why I said earlier, it's nice to have a support group and you get family involvement, so that sometimes it's important that you take a step back and get some fresh air. Because, you know, remember, you're dealing with a loved one, and it could be your parent, and no one wants to see a parent, you know, in these difficult times. So it is emotional. You have to watch out for yourself. But I think that's why you have to work as a team, and you have to every so often take a step back.
Yep, absolutely. I would say that, you know, when I think about when I get overwhelmed in the moment and I'm providing care, it is totally okay to just to be like, you know what, excuse me, just a minute. And you just take those deep breaths. When you do that, you are providing oxygen to your brain, and you just say, you know what, I'm going to take 5 minutes, and you just do those deep breaths if in that moment you are really frustrated. But burnout, you know, it creeps up, right? Over time, you do so much every day, and you just get really overwhelmed. And there will come a point, I mean, if you haven't already considered this, but, you know, we always recommend respite care. You know, if it might look a little bit different now because of COVID, but if you have somebody in your care team who's able to come in and give you the day off or give you half a day, I mean, respite, as my cat comes up into the camera, respite care can really make a difference. And if it's scheduled into your care, I mean, over time, that will make a difference for you. So if every week, you know, you have somebody who makes dinner, and then you can go off and take a couple hours, right? Or whatever the case may be, that respite care can really make a huge difference.
And that's where one of the things is going through finances and being able to arrange potentially for aides and other caregivers to come in is hugely important to keeping your sanity as well. Yeah.
And being on top of your own health will make sure that you can provide the best care possible down the line too, right? You know, we have this unfortunate statistic where caregivers will die earlier than the person that they provide care for. And it's because the stress of caregiving is so immense. But if you take care, and it's easier said than done, I totally know, but taking care of your physical and mental health will make sure that you survive the long run, right? And that's what we want.
And not to feel guilty that you're not Superman or Superwoman. You know, we're human, and we have to accept that.
Yeah. And with dementia, you know, in the caregiving moments, like, you get whatever you can get in that moment. If, you know, you're doing somebody's nails and you can only do one hand, don't feel the pressure that, okay, I got to do this again later. I got to continue what I was doing. Dementia is so moment by moment, and you take what you can get, and that's totally okay. You know, in some cases, it's not the end of the world, right? If they get applesauce as a snack and not like this huge elaborate thing, totally fine. Yep.
We did have more questions in the chat. So one is, are there any new medical advances?
Oh, medical advances in terms of treatment? I'm going to take that to mean. I got to think about this.
You know, Claudia, that's funny. I was just thinking about it too. And I was going to post some, I mean, there are a lot of great things. We have an app that can keep you up on the latest Alzheimer's and dementia research. But just this summer, we had a global research conference that was supposed to take place in person, and they had to make it virtual. And the beautiful thing about it is that they made it free. And so everybody got to attend, researchers and research students, and even it was open to the public. And so it was all these researchers from throughout the world presenting new information and new findings. And there were a couple of things that I saw on the news that I remember. One was about some kind of link between people who get flu and pneumonia vaccines and a decreased incidence of Alzheimer's and dementia. There was also a new blood test that can detect higher levels of plaques in the blood, and it's a really inexpensive test, and it's something that can be due way earlier on in the process, which is interesting. It's kind of an ethical dilemma, you know. So if you're 25, would you want to take a blood test and find out if you have an increased level of these plaques that can lead to some form of dementia later? Interesting. That one had not been approved yet. And I just went to a research Zoom, and there was also, what is it? There's a new treatment that was just submitted to the FDA for approval, and they're expecting approval by next spring, March of 2021, that shows really promising results. If you want to Google it, it's aducanumab. And I believe that is something that has been used previously for like cancer treatment. And so I'll type that in the chat real quick if you hang out for a minute. And that was interesting. But there's always research going on, so they're always finding things. Sorry, Claudia, anything else you can add?
I thought that was great. Thanks, Susan. All right, there's some other ones in here. The next one is there compensation from Social Security for family caregivers?
No. And now, for people that have certain long-term care policies, on certain long-term care policies, they will pay a family caregiver.
I will also put in here, or maybe Susan, if you want to type it, our respite care scholarship program. So when you, and you know, you have to take what you can get, right? So even if you pay a neighbor or have a neighbor come in for like a couple hours, you can get reimbursed. We have a scholarship program. It's just really like a pot of money, and people can say, hey, you know, I paid for this respite care, I paid for this respite care, and we can reimburse that payment that you did for respite, which is just an extra resource. And it's up to $500, I believe, so.
But if people have a long-term care policy, they should check those policies to see if they allow family caregivers, because a lot of times they do, and people get you know, some sort of reimbursement.
Claudia, is that respite scholarship only available in certain counties?
I believe so. It might be Southeast Michigan. It's always worth exploring.
There was one last question in the chat. Are there legal repercussions if you take your parents' car away if their doctor says they should not drive and you know they will not stop driving?
Well, when you say legal ramifications, I mean, if someone doesn't want to give up their driver's license and they haven't been declared incompetent, you don't own the car, you're really not liable. However, if you own that car and you know they shouldn't be driving, you let them drive, yes, you can be held legally responsible for that.
That's an excellent question.
It's one of the keys as to who owns that car. If you had a parent and they had, you know, Alzheimer's and you know they shouldn't be driving, you let them drive your car and they're in an accident, you're going to be held responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, forget the legal, morally. You know, we all would feel guilty if someone we loved who shouldn't have been driving was in an accident and someone was harmed. It would be the, I think morally, we'd all feel horrible.
And you can also, to get the ball rolling, you could fill out a request for driver evaluation form and submit it to the DMV. And that prompts them to evaluate that person for driving. So they can be the ones to say, hey, you can't be driving anymore. So it, can kind of take it out of your hands.
I will tell you the conversation. What I agreed with my mom, who did not want to give up her driver's license. We hired a driving instructor to give her a driving test.
Yep.
And trust me, I made sure the instructor was going to fail her no matter what. But my mom accepted that. We were able to then not have her drive. So that's what we did. We brought in, a driver's ed instructor.
Yep. Excellent.
And as I told my mom today, with Uber and, grandchildren, she can go wherever she wants, whenever she wants.
Mm-hmm.
And just in case nobody saw this in the chat, or some of you didn't see it, we are recording this and I will be editing it and uploading it to our YouTube channel so that you can revisit it or share it with your family or loved ones or friends.
Oh, thanks. Any other questions? Susan, I don't know if you put this in the chat, but I can put that DMV form in there.
The link that I put in about how to report someone, when you click on that page, it has that form in it. Okay. I didn't put the direct link to the form.
Yeah.
But it just was more information about how to challenge someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's excellent.
I really want to thank Rick Bloom and Claudia and Susan, especially for spending the evening with us, sharing all of this helpful information, especially if you're new to this and trying to navigate these difficult topics with your loved one. And so I just want to thank you so much for spending this evening with us and answering all of our questions too.
Well, I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and to talk to people at the library. It's always great to be with Claudia and Susan. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. And I just want to remind everyone, be safe and protect yourselves.
Yep. Thanks so much, Rick, for your expertise, as always.
Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I didn't see any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and call it a night, and we'll end the meeting here. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening and your week.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Good night.